What is up, guys, and welcome to episode number 5 already of the Next Level Esports Podcast, the number one podcast about esports coaching and team development to help you and your team reach the next level by getting the people side of esports right. Today, I'm talking to the one and only Nicolai Hazel Larsen, and in this episode, we will talk about his experiences as a head coach and why exactly he pivoted away from coaching esports teams, but still is involved in esports. Nicolai is a former League of Legends head coach of Origin back in 2016 and is now primarily working as a sports coach and is also a freelance life coach, consultant, and mentor. There are many sides of coaching and no single person is the same. Everyone got things going on in their life and ambitions to pursue. All these little things and big things add up to points where you have to make decisions somewhere along the line. In this episode, you will get some great insights into some perspectives on how you can make decisions on a professional and personal level and how to pivot from coaching esports teams to other ambitions. How are you doing today, Nicolai?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and the audience of the Next Level Esports Podcast. I'm super thrilled for this episode because I believe you have a unique story to tell with also the esports side and also the traditional sports coaching side of it and the pivot in between. So I believe many esports players and coaches and other staff members maybe one time they want to transition to the traditional sports and want to pursue different ambitions, and maybe they feel stuck or only esports is their thing. So maybe you can give some insights how to pivot and make good informed decisions to get where you want to be in life. So Nicolai, let's start at the beginning of it all. What got you into coaching into the first place?
So this is one of those questions. They're so important because sometimes once you've been doing it for a while, you sort of forget your beginnings, right? And then you have one of those moments where you sit down and you think, why am I doing this, right? And I feel like when you reach that point, that's when you can really call yourself a coach. Because the thing is,
Mhm.
in the beginning, I actually didn't want to get into esports, which sounds, or into coaching in general, which sounds really, right? But
You didn't want to
I
get
didn't.
into. Okay.
What happened was I was actually a pretty decent athlete. I did diving, which is from the diving board with the somersaults and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And I was doing pretty okay. I was taking top 3 spots in the national championships up until the point when I turned 15. At one point, I got sort of injured, which
Okay.
meant that it was no longer possible for me to do it on a high level. But 15 is like the highlight of your life when you are 15, right? You're like blossoming into this young adult, and you suddenly what you've been doing your whole life falls apart, and then
Yeah.
I completely panicked. So my boss and coach, God bless her, she offered me, "What about coaching? Would you like to become a diving coach?" And
At
then
the
I
age
sort
of
of picked that up.
15?
At the age of 15, they gave me a junior team initially, right? So and then
Oh,
over the next
great.
couple of years, I worked my way up the ladder and up the ladder,
For sure.
as you would, right? So that's how I got started. Was accidentally because I got injured.
Right. So that is a great story. So how do you start off at coaching at age 15? It feels like so prematurely that what do you know about, let's say, other people or yourself? I would find it really difficult, but if they got you a chance to and see that potential within you, that is a great compliment.
Look, okay, so this is fantastic that you asked this because actually I'm kind of lying here. It's not coaching that I was doing when I was 15, it was teaching. And the reason this is sort of a
All right.
sarcastic
Liar,
reply.
liar, ass on fire.
You're right,
He's a
right.
teacher for 50
but
years
but
old.
but the main difference is when I started, the job was called being the coach. But since it was a
Right.
junior team,
Okay.
what you're doing is actually teaching. And I would say the main difference here is that um, when you're teaching, you can at least often have this curriculum, right? And
Yes.
as a beginner diving coach, that's what we had. Was we had this set of exercises that they were to do and this and this and this day, and then that's sort of like, because you're teaching to the whole pack, the whole team. When you're that young, it is daunting to have that much responsibility, but it was also kind of
Yes.
straightforward, right? Because I just looked at the sheet of paper and it told me to do this and this and this, but it was mind-numbingly boring. of course. Like, so I had to sort of try my hand with the harder teams. And
Hmm.
then once you go up a little bit, then you can start calling it coaching.
Right. So now you only did, you had a form where there are some exercises and things that you had to practice for the day, and you just worked on the list of like, okay, the first 10 minutes we do the warming up, or we do this type of exercise that we always do. Then we have 10 or to 20 minutes of, I don't know, diving or different exercises. Then we move on to part C, and then we have the ending of the training, and then see you guys tomorrow or in
Pretty
a couple of
much.
days.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah,
much.
this
Yeah.
sounds boring.
It was, and that's the thing was I started like we sent these young people to these beginner tournaments to get them sort of used to the system because there's a lot of different rules they need to know, right? And
Mm,
we whenever they were going to these tournaments, I found myself getting excited on their behalf, right? Because you want them to do good, also because it reflects good on you as the coach. And
yeah.
at that moment, I sort of figured, okay, I want to take this higher. I want to get better at this. But as you say, I was only 15, so that's actually where my problem was. Is that even when I was in the LEC, I was omega young for a coach, which was a huge issue for me
What is
coming up.
Omega Young?
I actually joined the LEC when I was 19 as a coach. You can see, like,
Wow.
I think only one player, I want to say Sven, but I'm not even sure, was younger than me at this time, by a couple of months, right? So I was the coach, but I was also the youngest person on the team, which was
Yeah.
so surprising. And that's sort of been the story of my life up until now. Is I've been doing stuff very very young, right?
Yeah. How
So
how
yeah,
did, how did those players react with you being a 90-year-old head coach telling them what to do? Was that a struggle in the beginning? I believe so in some way.
I'm going to. So Expeke was my boss, right? Because he had the Origin team. I believe he still
Right. Backdoor
does.
Cassidy.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that was my idol. Like coming into esports, I started watching League of Legends in late season one, even I think maybe
Mm-hmm.
beginning season two, and then I hop in, and I think it was season six back in 2016, or yeah, this should be right.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to God, I don't know why Expeke hired me, and that's completely honest. Now, hire me, please, everyone. But back then, when I was 19, I was too young, and it was too big of a leap because I'd only coached challenger teams, like with challenger players at this point. I had some
Mm-hmm.
LAN experience. I had some experience coaching these guys, but it's not that I wasn't ready to coach that level of esports, but I wasn't ready to coach these people who were significantly more experienced than me because they had sort of different expectations than I did going into it. And I was at 19 very inflexible. Now I think
Yeah.
I'm better.
Yeah, for sure. But how did a team like Origin, of course, in 2016, Expeke as being a boss could be not that experienced as well, right?
Mhm.
So maybe I don't know. I don't believe you made a mistake, but you say like I felt so inexperienced. Why do you think they hired you? Because that could be also very interesting for the audience. Why does a boss or an esports owner wants to hire a 90 years old where there are so many other options available? Why did you get picked?
I don't want to speak to the definitive motivations of my boss and stuff, but what I can say is that the thing that I am very good at and also was very good at back then is taking coaching from a very specific and niche subject and then sort of broadening it into the whole life, right? That is
Mm,
my official title given later down the road was something akin to life coaching, which is because I had this background in sports coaching, right? So
yes.
whenever we had a problem on teams I worked with, it was very little to do with, oh, we need to try different characters, we need to try a different strategy. And it was much more in terms of looking at the holistic human, as you would say within these life coaching terms,
Yeah.
is if something is going wrong, if it just doesn't feel right, we need to look at not necessarily the work but what's surrounding the work. Did the athlete sleep well? Is he motivated? How's his
Mm,
physical health? Is he the team synergy is a very big one in especially League of Legends because like it is a very the game really lives and dies on whether you feel comfortable in your teammates, right?
mm.
Um, So yeah, so that was definitely what would help me get out there, was the fact that I had more than just characters. I had more than just a champion. I had more this holistic approach to it. This look at the whole human, so to speak.
Yeah. So can you name maybe one or two things so to get a bit of a grasp, like what made you stood out from other coaches at that point in time? What was that niche that you brought into the that you could transform into a much broader subject? So they made sign or they why they signed you.
I I can definitely, like, so the principles I was working on back then was, this is, it was very niche back in the day. But what
Mm-hmm.
I did was I took this approach of less but more focused work, right? So what I was back then, and I think still, which is weird to me, there is this, and I don't know if I can phrase it like this, but there's this fetishization, this very American idea that the more you work, the cooler you are, the better, right? Like putting in
Mm.
14, 16 hours a day is somehow better than putting in like an 8, 10-hour workday, right? And as a sports coach who know that sports isn't just the physical, getting physically taxed part of it, the hardest part is actually mental. And the tricky thing about mental is that you feel like you're okay way after you're not okay. And what
Mm.
that means is sure, the brain will feel like you can do 10, 12, 14, 16 hours, but your surroundings will immediately pick up and ping pong off of the fact that you are definitely not on your peak after 10 hours of working, right?
Yeah,
So
100%.
yeah, so that was my approach coming into it, was I was very unwilling, and very unwilling to bend on the player's physical and mental well-being. And it was very something I sort of experimented with, was which part of this glorification of Korean strategies can we sort of disassociate from as quickly as possible, and say, okay, actually we do want to have athletes that only work 6, 8 hours max per day, right? So they have time to be a whole complete human being, as we would say.
Hmm. And what was the effect? Because in the beginning, did you come in with these type of holistic life coaching concepts and they were overwhelmed and they liked it a lot, or how did they handle such situations and how was that?
So in the beginning, one thing that I had a lot of issues with was when I started out, nothing I said actually stuck, which is somehow to do with the fact that I was very young, 18, 19, and 20
Mm,
when I started coaching. But predominantly, the reason I was very much not ignored, but I was always told this: yes, we like the ideas in theory, but actually executing on it is different, right? Like we can't just cut out working time because we have scrim partners. They expect us to scrim and stuff like that, right? So that
mm,
was always the thing, was I would go to the managers, for example. This is a hypothetical, but I would go to
yeah.
the managers and say, we need to not play 2 hours later than we plan every day. And they would say, yeah, let's look at it after the season now, right? Let's look at it after the season. But it doesn't make any sense, because then after the season, you send all the players home. So there isn't any looking at anything. And then you end up stuck in this nasty feedback loop. So
Mm.
actually, I believe the question was how did it go? Or
Yeah, how did it go? Yeah, what were the effects of it when you're coming in with such in terms of esports
Mm.
a very different perspective on how things were in 2016.
Okay, so the main thing for me was that I was very good at knowing what the correct system looks like, right? Like I was very good at knowing, 45 minutes of exercise every day, 7 hours of sleep, correct
Yes.
nutrition. This is all important, right? But
Mm.
the thing is that my version coming in was very brutish. I tried to force all the changes on all the players at once.
Yes.
And if you ever try to change like a habit, you can't change six habits at once, right?
Pretty difficult.
Right, yeah. And what was it in it for me as well was that I was going through some life things for me, and I wasn't very good at sticking to my own advice at this point. I didn't sleep well, I didn't eat well, I even smoked cigarettes for this period. So coming in as a life coach, that was very not genuine. and that was also a big transformation for me, was going into my adult years. I had to live the process, and I really had to figure out, as it wasn't enough to just know the right words, like telling the P players they need to be healthy. For them to truly believe it, and that
You're
is
right.
necessary for it to work, is you need to show them that I am a happier person for being healthy, but I wasn't, because I wasn't healthy, right? So that was a big thing feel for me, was I had to grow the hell up, so to speak. And that was hard. That was so hard.
That is pretty an amazing story because oftentimes we, as coaches, how I translate it for myself and what I see around is we want to portray something that is in concept, or like the thought that we feel like, yeah, this is the way to do. And theoretically, exactly what you're saying is, yeah, they buy into the story or in the concept, but in practicality, when in the day-to-day life, it's super hard to do because you have to change so many things, your whole habits and your whole routines. So it's a way different approach. And I think a lot of coaches, um, yeah, I believe also at a professional level and the levels below that, they might have experienced some similar things when they were maybe not as genuine as they would like to be, right? To be
Mhm.
really truthful in practicing what you preach. And that is basically maybe the key word. And
Oh yeah.
we we maybe are putting up a smoke screen and feel like, oh, this all good and sunshine and rainbows, but on the back end of it, it's a different story.
Oh yeah. And this was actually the key thing for me, was coming into these teams. Um, the thing that changed me more than anything was learning that it's not embarrassing to be honest. Because once you're out of high school, you have this weird mentality that the fronting personality that you show in your daily life, in work and school and such, is your real personality, because it's the coolest version of you. And
Yeah.
the thing is, you can either work at high intensity or you can be cool. If you've noticed, the coolest people you've ever met will always insist that they're not cool. And it's not because they aren't cool, it's because of the fact that you can't focus on being too cool, but also on being effective, right? If you
Yeah.
want to be a good player, if you want to be a good coach, you need to be able to cut through your own bullshit. And this is like this idea that I heard a lot from players was, oh, I knew what we were supposed to do in this game, but I didn't want to say anything, which means,
Mm.
well, then you don't want to win. It's that simple, right? You need to be able to think, oh, this might be a stupid idea, but I'm actually going to put it out there anyway, right? Because it is, if you can't, if you, this is so cheesy, but if you're not willing to be embarrassed, you're not willing to actually give it a go, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like um preventing to be embarrassed, because I believe that many players or coaches have that type of mindset, but you do it because you're courageous.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You turn it around into something positive, and then you
Mhm,
put that right attribute towards yourself. Like, you don't make those connections, or you don't trust people because you're naive or whatever.
mhm,
You do it because you are courageous. That is something empowering, that you feel like, oh, I'm courageous, therefore I admit my mistakes, or I do
mhm.
something, or I speak out my creative ideas, or that may seem like one in a million chance, but I'll throw it out there anyway.
Oh yeah, it's a very fantastic mindset to view it with, because that makes me sound almost cool for being embarrassing, which is, I like that.
Yeah, yeah, courageous. Yeah,
I
yeah.
like
But
that.
if you repeat it enough times and you start to think about it, it can be, I really believe, just like with anything, can be part of you.
Oh
If you have
yeah.
the intention to be courageous, and if you understand it from that perspective, it changes so much.
Uh-huh.
Are
And
you a
it's,
courageous player, or are you a shameful player?
oh yeah, like
Choose.
in this mindset, what was very important for me as well was not to get too stuck in my own, because there's this notion that I struggle with. I don't know if you can tell me if this is something that many people struggle with, if it was just me, right? But
Okay.
so people will tell you, you need to be confident. Like,
Mm.
you need to have confidence that the stuff you know is good and stuff like this. And there's this new hot word, which is super popular in the last 10 years, which is imposter syndrome, which you
Yeah.
don't feel like you're supposed to be in some sort of place.
Yeah.
But then the other side of that coin was you need to be humble, right? And that's also something I was told, which you need to be able to take input from everyone and you need to be able to change your ways, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. It was one of the coaches' advice, I believe, in the
uh-huh,
first episode
was be
of
humble.
George Furno. He said like, "Be humble."
Mm. It's great advice. That is a fantastic piece of advice. But I got stuck in this loop, and again, you guys let me know if I was the only one with this issue, right? But I got stuck in this loop where when I was being humble, I was looking at people's reactions to what I was saying, and I was thinking, oh, hell, they want me to be confident here. So then when I would be confident, I got stuck in the other one where I would be like, oh, no, now I sound arrogant, right? And then I was never actually satisfied with my output. And
Mm.
the reason I sort of was many different smaller things, right? But the main thing for me here was it was very important for me to figure out I am not hired to win worlds. Okay. As a coach, you need to get out of the pit trap, which is looking at the end goal. We are not winning worlds right now. That's not at all what we're doing. We're like 8 months away. We might even not be in the correct league. So you shouldn't try to copy what people are doing immediately preceding worlds. This is
Mm.
like the best piece of advice I've ever heard, which is stop trying to be so bloody Korean and try to be better you. Try to be more you, right? like um so that was big for me, right? Was finding out that every single day you need to set up a goal for that day. And often the goal will be the same thing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But you need
Mm.
to bring it up once every day, evaluate it once every day, and think, is this still consistent with what we want to do and not where we want to get, right? Because you can work with stuff like we want to be better players. You can work with stuff like we want to have better synergy, but if you have no car, no gas, you can't just say I want to go on vacation and then like let's just magic our way to vacation. No, you got to get car and gas, right? And
Yeah.
those are the two next steps of this process.
Yeah, I really like that. So there were two things that really struck my attention. So the last point that you made is you have to repeat the goal or whatever you're working on every day. So it's repetition. What
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of players and coaches do, they believe, oh, we talked about this in the beginning of the season. We set our goals and yada yada. We are ambitions and we try to take it and on a day to day or weekly basis. And after a month you don't see anything of that back because they don't repeat their goals or
Yeah.
the values, their team culture, the structure, because yeah, we already talked about that, right? So that is long gone. No, no, no. Like really with the finger, like no, you don't do that. Like you need to repeat and need to remember the players, why we are here, what we are doing, what our goals are, and if the goals don't align when you wake up, then you should have a conversation about it.
Here's an exercise that I want every single coach who thinks they're good at planning to do, which is
Great
I
stuff.
if you have the luxury of hitting the beginning of a season and you know you're going to be working with any team, it doesn't have to be professional or anything close to it. You can even be sports coaching, right?
Mm.
You are going to set for yourself some goals that you have for the season. And as a good and well read coach, you are, of course, going to have goals in different categories. So you're going to have like mentality goals, you're going to have like strategy goals, you're going to have like performance goals for what, and
Right.
stuff like this, right? Now you write all that down. And then every single morning when you show up to work, write down what your goals actually fucking were and then put it in a little box. And just after 2 weeks, pick it out and look for yourself. Did you even get it right? Because most people don't actually, they can't. Like they'll show up and they'll remember like two out of
Mm-hmm.
four goals, and they'll be like, ah, so those are the two I remember today. So I guess that's what we're doing. Ha ha ha, you know. And I thought like I did this because I had like I did it for personal goals for personal reasons, right? But like even like you think you know where you want to get and then you think you know the steps, and when you write them down the first day, the steps they seem simple, right? Because you're writing, okay, so
Yeah.
we fix this and then we're there, but they never are. and, and I think that's there's a lot of as a tendency for people to sort of focus on this idea of the repetition and then saying, well, the important thing is to repeat it, right? But really, I would even take it a step further and say the important thing is being a person for whom repeating stuff comes naturally, right? Because the very first thing that you have to understand if you want to learn a language is you can read whatever amount of words, pages, and whatever systems you want today, but you need to pick up the book again tomorrow, right? Like is
Yeah, else you
as long
forgot.
as right. Right. So if it doesn't come naturally for you to be repetitive, then you need to figure out how to get there first. And then from there, we can start talking, right? Um, Having the right idea and the right goal is like tertiary, right? If first you need to secure correct output, you need to secure you have the energy and mental stamina to work for a long enough time. Once you have the correct output, you need to secure the correct crew, the correct people around you, right? And only once you have those two things, you can actually start talking the actual well-defined strategy of what you will be doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just in my own words. So your output is basically the vision, something that is strong enough that motivates you, that makes you have that dot on the horizon that you always can move forward to. If you don't have a good enough vision, then you will run out of steam. You have no goals or anything, and below that, you will find the right staff in order to execute on that. Is that basically in different words put?
When I work with some teams, I sometimes have this issue, which is that I'll have a 19-year-old guy who has tendonitis,
Yeah,
which can be a career bloody killer because that
yeah,
shit really hurts, and it's not like ow, it's
yeah. Like I cannot move. I don't want to
terrifying
move.
pain. Yeah, it's terrifying pain. If you have these sorts of blocks in your near or potential future, you are not serious. And that's the very first key you need to secure is and for your own sake too, it's not can I make it to worlds or whatever your end goal will be.
Mm,
The output needs to be secured first, right? You need to understand that you are not a player looking to play a computer game to professional standards. What you're actually doing is you are building yourself into wholesale um, a work machine, right? And the work machine needs to be turned off sometimes and lubricated and maintained, right?
mm.
And only once you have the correct machine to work with, no, for most people, this would be a healthy body and sort of a solid social life, and also maybe a hobby or two, so you have some sort of differentiation in your life, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but that's the number one goal is can you actually see the whole season through realistically? Because if you can't, quit right now, right? Like if there's so many players, and it breaks my heart that will go into a season and they will feel it from like I had a guy day two, day two of the season. He said to me, "My hand hurts," and I said to him, "Well, what the hell? We needed to know this 2 months ago at least, right?" And he
Mm,
said, "Yes, but I didn't want to get kicked off the team." So fantastic! Now you fucked the team and you fucked your hand. Apologies for the language, but
yeah.
I take that very seriously, and it bothers me how many people sort of think that they can sort of play like sort of this weird game of hot potato with their body. Like, okay, so my hand hurts now, but I'll just use the other hand more, or so. I don't know what they were planning to do, right? And
Yeah, that's totally. If you would do that, it really amplifies that illness because you change the way your body posture and the way your brain makes contact with your, let's say, body intelligence, your natural state. You will be always off, always stressed, and becoming more ill every single day when you do that.
let me quote this one physician. I believe it was a physician, but we work with a physician, one of my teams, and she said this very poignant thing, which is having pain is actually the single and only way your body knows how to tell you to stop. So if you have even a little bit of pain, that means
Mm.
stop, right? Because there isn't like this word like the stop button isn't at I can't continue anymore. The stop button is at ow, it hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, for sure.
so yeah, that's number one is securing the output, right? And then second to that, you need to secure the team because once more, do you understand how many teams fall apart because they need to make horrible mid-season replacements because they banked on having the five correct players, but they didn't actually let the players meet each other, talk to each other, anything, right?
Yeah, no team dynamics, no team
Exactly.
synergy, anything.
Right. And then once you have those two things secured, you can begin discussing what is my end goal for this project, right?
Mm.
And the one of the reasons, one of the ways you know we're doing it wrong in esports is that you have these people who will completely without sarcasm in their voice say, let's play half a season or half a year, maybe 1 year, and we hope to go to worlds. You know, if I try to make
Yeah.
like a football club and I tell my sports director, yeah, okay, so in 6 months we would like to win the like the FIFA or something, right? They will they will laugh me out of there. They will actually say you're not being serious. There's no one
Yeah.
does that. And even if you do it in 6 months, it's luck, right? Like it won't be actual skill. You will hit the right meta or something.
Yeah.
There is no way to make that sort of output.
It's
um,
it's coming also what I'm thinking about in day-to-day life and building teams and connecting with people. We all are looking for shortcuts, but you can't. You can't make shortcuts
oh
in
no.
life or within performance or with your goals. Like, look around you. Who made shortcuts and made it to worlds? Who made shortcuts? They put in the work. Maybe some people have more talent and they got there faster because they're more intelligent, more mechanically gifted, or whatever they have. But they all worked for it in an intellectual,
Oh
smart
yeah.
way.
Can I make a small addendum to this idea because this is a very good point. But there's a one little fix, which is you cannot make shortcuts in your own life. Okay, it is definitely possible to find shortcuts, but the thing is, you won't know the shortcut, and anything that looks like a shortcut to you isn't actually a shortcut, right?
Mm.
For example, if I live in a rural village my whole life and I don't know an optician is a thing, and I go to the eye doctor and he gives me glasses, that guy is a wizard. Do you see what I mean? Like he
Yeah.
will be. This is a true real life shortcut, right? And I would say if you're in this sort of position where you're hitting the rut and you are starting to look for shortcuts, you need to dedicate a very minor portion of your life to studying, and you need to study anything you don't actually know yourself already. If it's a field you're even remotely well rehearsed in, put it down. You already know that stuff, right? And I cannot tell you how many coaches will come to me and Google coaching. Like the people, like the things they need is going to be compiled into a super cute little book for them in advance, right? That's not
Hmm.
how this works at all. You need to do the thing where you reach out to many different industries and you look for the smart things they do. And then you need to find out why they do that, right? And once
We're
you're there,
talking about experience now,
exactly. Well, yeah, but in terms of the shortcut, that's actually sort of why I pivoted away from coaching professional teams was
right?
because I was in this situation where I felt like I kept reaching out to people in the industry, and the stuff they put back in my life was sort of the same that I was putting into theirs. And once you reach the point where everyone agrees with each other, get out. Right. That was my mindset was I'm at the peak of esports and I feel unequipped to deal with this. But not only that, I felt like everyone around me was unequipped to deal with it.
Like you
Which
reached the hive mind ceiling of esports
yeah,
coaching, basically. Yeah, you are. Everyone is the smartest guy in the room, and they don't know who can elevate the next level.
mm,
Something like that.
And there will be some of those guys who think they're being smart when they don't give out their real secrets. They're like you'll say something to them and they'll be like,
Yeah.
"Aha, interesting." And then because they don't give you anything, they feel smart and they're like, "Yeah, we're winning this season by not sharing information, right?" But the reality of the situation is it's not EU team versus EU team. I mean, of course it's that as well, but ultimately it is esports as an industry against movies, against real sports, right? Because those are the people we're trying to take
Hmm.
paying customers away from, right? And if you ask any serious esports coach right now, they'll be like, "Oh, I love my job. I wish I worked the hours and got the salary of a professional sports coach though." Like anyone who doesn't say this is not necessarily into sports, at least.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, 100%. So you just touched upon basically the core topic of this podcast, your pivoting moment
mhm.
in esports. So what made you, was it only being we are all the smartest guy in the room, there are no disagreements anymore, I'm leaving? What made you come up to that decision, and how did you make the decision? Was it just that, by making the decision like we are all the smartest guy in the room, there's no next level in this area of esports coaching, or what did you do and how did you make that decision?
So for me, there was two defining factors. One was a personal and one was a professional decision. The and then also actually three, I would say three defining factors, which was sort of a timeline thing. But the first, I'm not gonna mince words here. The first and primary position was that even if I was in a situation where I was good enough to work with professional esports teams, I
Hmm.
didn't like what I was giving. I always felt like the stuff that I put into teams was very upfront. Does that make sense?
Can
I
you name an example?
I would come into a team and I would give them sort of a reference framing change. I would say, okay, so we move some time from doing this into doing this other thing, and then that other thing would give some benefits. But then after the first 6 months at most in a team, I would start to run out of ideas, and it occurred to me that what I really wanted to do was I wanted to take esports and then copy what the sports team was doing, which is a
Mm.
great idea because sports has been a thing for since forever. So they have a lot of great ideas, and it turns out a lot of that is applicable. But once you get to the point where the thing you thought were the solution isn't the solution, you end up in this weird limbo. And I
Mm.
felt like the industry was very insecure because the industry is very hot on the idea of just firing people all the time, right? And changing out people and replacing people. And not that I was constantly getting fired, but the fact that that was a possibility in my life made me
Mm.
have this sense of anxiety that I did not want, right? Like especially not so young is the fact that I had this idea that I was going to ruin it all for myself because I would say one stupid thing, right? So so for me what happened was I started asking the teams for resources to slow down. I started saying, hey, the next steps are the hard ones. We need more money. We need more time. Instead of saying this season, I need you guys to start speaking in years, right? I need you guys to say the
Yeah.
next 2 to 5 years. And I couldn't get it from anyone. No
Mm.
teams, no owners, no orgs were willing to do that for me. And you just from your reaction, I know you've heard this exact story before, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Uh,
I know a couple of teams that are working with 1 year contracts, so that is an improvement. And more organizations are picking up, so they can keep the players that they like and can reorganize teams if they want to. For example, but yeah, overall, still, I believe in the amateur scene and in the semi-pro scene, most of it is still only a contract of
mm,
between 2 and 4 months at
mm,
max, and that is also a difference between esports and traditional sports. The way the volatility of competition. All
mhm,
right, you don't have a summer, only a summer competition where you play 30 matches and that is the thing, and you have 20 more players on your bench or your academy team where you have a full pool of talent where you can just interchange people with.
mm,
So it's a way different culture. And what you just touched upon as well is you said like, I wanted to copy things, and that's what I also do in terms of the content insights. But we also need to remember ourselves that we are working in esports, and there's like two different levels. Like traditional sports is so, let's say, far, is still very slow if you know the traditional sports and how
mm, yeah.
changing things. But in terms of what the great ideas that you just said as well, is you have great ideas and they have great models and great things, but it's not the same culture. It's not at the same level. Uh,
Mhm.
if we are thinking about, yeah, why can't we work with players of around on average 20 years old and do all these things with them? Why? Because they are gamers. They haven't started playing, let's say, sports at the age of 4 or 5, running after a ball and being coached and in these environments and competitive. We need to look at the facts as well, where we come from and what are the difference between those two. And I believe we are getting there,
Mhm.
but it's gonna take quite some years. What are your thoughts on that, on those
This
differences?
It's a fantastic point, and that's the one thing I realized like 2 weeks after joining Origin, right? Was these guys have never really worked with a coach before.
Yeah,
Because okay, you have to understand, this is my day when I come into my sports team is, hello everyone, today we are doing this, this, and this, right?
yeah.
And then you know what happens? They go and do it, and that was just
Magic.
it, right? But in esports, I would come into a team and I would say hi, this, and this, and then they would immediately be like, but why?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you just
Does it help
what?
us to become
What?
better? What?
Yeah, and then
Exercising,
as a
nutrition, like, huh?
as a young 19-year-old, I was completely misreading this as the fact like what they're actually doing when they're saying but why is they're giving me an opportunity to prove to them that I fit, right, that I know my shit and I deserve to be there, because otherwise I don't like, no team wants to have a leader that they're sort of unsure about. So every team will try to force an opinion, right? And the way they
Hmm.
do that is they force you to say either something really smart or really stupid, so that they can completely discard you or completely elevate you, right? And
Yeah.
I did not tolerate that because I have a very strict philosophy, which is let people make mistakes, right? Which is completely antithetical to this mindset. So for me, that was a big deal, was realizing this exactly.
Yeah, I understand. And also the point of, I believe it's super healthy. People should
Oh.
make mistakes. If you're like within teaching or coaching and you have time with people, they need to make mistakes. Else, like, oh, Johnny, don't play with fire. Like, they need to burn their hands on the fire in order to, let's say, oh, I'm in a crisis, now I'm able to change. Like, oh, now I listen to my daddy or my mommy or my coach or whatever. That just is like basic one-on-one coaching or things. But I believe also the point that we touched upon a couple of minutes ago about the League of Legends scene that is not um, that that developed yet, is they are not ready for that, because also the contracts only have 3 to 4 months. We cannot be allowed to make mistakes, because if we are allowed to make mistakes, then now sitting on these mistakes for maybe 1 or 2 weeks, they think it's a waste of time.
the um the thing that is interesting when you say waste of time is wasting
Quote
who's
unquote, huh? Quote
yeah,
unquote,
like
huh?
what that actually means is wasting money, right? Because everyone involved in esports is will tell you we have way too much time, right? Like we have, it's not that there isn't a lot of work, in fact it's the opposite, there is too much work. But
Mm.
it's the fact that I cannot tell you the name of a player who can honestly tell me they don't scrim too much. Maybe it's different now because I've been out of the game for 2 or 3 years at this point, like out of directly working with peak performance teams. But back when I worked, at least, the whole industry was based around your amount of scrim time plus your amount of game VOD analysis plus your amount of solo queue. And this equals a total number of hours every day that you spend on esports. But what you don't have to factor in here is the fact that for a 5-person scrim block, I am fortunate if I get 2 of those games actually of quality,
Yeah.
right? Because so I go to one of some of the best teams on the planet, and they will unironically, completely seriously tell me, we will just play, and we will figure out what the goal of today's practice is later.
Yeah.
And
See
right
what
there,
sticks.
yeah, and right there, as a coach, I lost like every single piece of spaghetti in my pocket just fell right on the floor because I was like, you can't do that. Like all the cards came on the table. I was like, if we have no plan, how will I know what success is? Because to me, as a sports coach,
Yeah.
success is how well did we live up to the plan, right?
Yeah.
so, so that was a big deal.
Yeah, it's great point. I cannot agree more with you on this particular thing, that there are no goal settings. Everything is just like, okay, we meet at 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock. Jump into the scrim. Okay, guys, what are the picks and bans? What are we gonna do? Okay, we're gonna just do this like we did yesterday. Okay, good luck. And then 5 hours later, yeah, the zoo vote review. Yeah, you went here, and then they're all like uninteresting, or for them interesting details, that's spending way too much time, that is so specific that there's no plan or thing to measure what the goal in the first place is, to measure your improvement. Like, did we do the rotations? Did we got objectives? Or are we focusing on the communication? It's just like random things throwing at each other, like, oh, we should do this and then we should that, oh, we should rotate, oh yeah, this particular champion, micro bio macro, and we need to change it. Yeah, I agree. And then the next game, all of it is forgotten.
Oh,
It's like
exactly.
everyone done
Yeah.
wants to, just like a dog, pee on the same spot, and then okay, move on to the next one. Okay.
Mm. the the thing that I always found interesting was how much of the judging was being done by players. And I've always argued for the fact that as a player, it's not that you aren't allowed to have opinions, but you shouldn't want to, right? Like as a player, what you should approach, what the ideal situation for a player is any one situation where he can focus as much as possible on performing well in the game without stress, right?
Hmm.
So every single time, players will sit there and sort of do stuff like troll a scrim game, or get shit sleep and ruin the whole next day of practice. This kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What actually ends up happening in this situation is you get extremist coaches who will say, oh, well, I need to be able to discipline my players, right? I need to be able to penalize him because that means he will stop. And these are the people raised by parents from the 60s, because they're like the parents are like, I don't know what parenting my kid is. I'm just gonna smack him up, right? And it doesn't work. It never did. It never. Well, smacking your kid never works. Penalizing your players also never works. Even the situations where Riot will fine a player, I guarantee you, if you get that guy over a cup of beer and you ask him, did you change your ways because you got fined 15,000 euro? The kid will say, what on earth are you talking about? I'm more careful now. That's it, right?
Yeah.
So the other side of the coin is just leave everything into the interpretation of the players, which is fantastically silly as well. And that's why we sort of come back, we pivot back to this idea of being able to communicate honestly, right? Because as long as there's this sort of muff and there's this weird idea that somehow a coach and a player is two different entities, then we're not going to reach true synergy, right? Because
Right.
what I always try to imprint in my players, and I get a lot of shit from a lot of coaches for this, but I stand by it,
All
is
right, let's go.
if I knew what the correct strategy was, right? Because this is the thing that a lot of players expect from a coach is, well, sir, Mr. Coach, can you please tell us what is the right champion to pick here, or what is the right
Yeah.
strategy, or even what's the right course of action, right?
Mm.
Then what I should do is I should sit down and I should reevaluate my priorities, and then I should become a professional player, right? Because guess what? There's no coach in game. So even if I have a great strategy, I don't want you to play by my strategy as a coach, because the role of the coach is to assemble, listen to what all the players have in their toolbox, and then pick the correct tools from those. But the idea isn't that I'm supposed to have a better tool. Does that make sense? The,
Yeah.
I,
So what you're talking about is, instead of I am the orchestrator, let's say, of the team, and I decide how the assembly plays or how the players play, I reverse it. I am the support of the players, and I try
exactly,
to get the best potential out of them
exactly.
and all their knowledge in the broad daylight. so everyone can see what everyone brings in, what their thoughts and their feelings and everything is,
Mm,
and then we can see it, view it, and then we as a one single unity, as one organism, as you say, we merge and we are synergized. Then we can make our own complete
mhm,
plan of the game that feels right with everyone. So they are not dependent on you, not dependent on themselves, but as one single organism.
mm,
Because a team is one single organism. At least I'd like to view it that way.
mm. Like this, like it's very simple because it's the same principle that you find in all your other life walks of life, right? Is what you're doing needs to be interesting, and it won't be interesting as long as you surround yourself with people who are of significantly different skill levels. But the skill level they are at is dependent on you, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
dependent on your acceptance as a group, which is to say, reading is fantastically fun, but reading books for 5-year-olds might not be so interesting to you and I, right? Like Peter has a dog, Peter
Yeah.
has a red dog, Peter
Yeah.
has a big red dog. But that doesn't mean we like that's what people want in coaching in peak terms, which is this idea that I am a Zen master and I have ideas and I have these secret strategies that no one else has. I just me because I'm smarter than everyone, and it's complete bullshit, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
guess what? If I had all these great ideas and strategies, I wouldn't be selling them to apologies, but grown-up teenagers in front of a computer. I'd be selling them to CEOs. Bill Gates would be in my pocket, right? If I could just
Yeah.
make people better at will. What I'm really good at as an actual successful coach, or at least decently successful, I would like to say myself, is I'm great at getting the best out of you, of just exactly this one person. And it's a very specific process, right? Because it completely relies on the fact that we click.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we establish some sort of power relationship, and then we're back to the teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm from, Denmark, we don't call our teachers Miss and Mrs. And that's fantastic because I've heard kids in my, not necessarily my class or whatever, but I've heard kids in school in Denmark can talk to their teacher about problems at home. They can talk to their teacher about their worries and fears. Not, of course, all kids, but for some, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this, like adult reaching and putting the kid on their level, that is what true synergy is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you are willing, like for that adult, treating a kid like a grown up, giving them the same respect and ideation is synergy, is because you are giving the other person a chance to present their best self. And as a coach, that is everything, is you need to be able to give people a chance to present their best self.
100%. I would like to add one thing that I find important on the thing what you just mentioned of like making the best version of the individual.
Mm.
The American way of building teams is there is no I in team.
Oh yeah.
What I believe and what Next Level Esports stands for is there are only I's within a team.
Oh
There are
yeah.
only individuals. And you have to look at each individual and know how they tick, know what they need, know what their
Mm.
potential is, bring that towards with another, so everyone can feast basically on each other knowledge and potential. So it's the opposite way around.
I think that's fantastic. And you always know someone has a bad idea if it can be summarized in a catchphrase, right? Like there's like even if your catchphrase is fantastic, you always should want to unpack it and tell people what's behind it. And I
Yeah.
sometimes find people don't have it. And
Unless
like,
you're American, then it's
yeah,
always awesome and fantastic.
yeah. But look, there's no I in team. But coach, I am hurt. My leg broke. Like there's
Yeah.
an I in team again, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Great stuff. Great stuff. So with also talking a little bit after what you've done after pivoting, what
mhm,
were the things that you did after exiting for esports
mm,
coaching, to talk about that also a little bit briefly?
mm. So after exiting esport, what was concerning to me was this idea that I could have people who were working. as professional players and even as professional coaches, having never actually had to cooperate with people before. And this was a stressful realization for me, was the fact that if I ask someone, an individual, to go and get really, really good at basketball on their own,
Mm-hmm.
today it's very much easier than 20 years ago because you have the internet. But
Mm-hmm.
even so, it won't take a lot of time for someone to seek out a coach, just completely automatically and instinctively, right? They'll seek
Mm-hmm.
out a sports team. But in esports, it wasn't so. And I was bitter at first. I was like, oh, it's because the people in esports are the people who couldn't succeed in sports. But it's not the case. And it
No, it's
definitely, no,
totally different.
it is two different industries. And I didn't, when I said that, I wasn't taking my own advice, which is listen to the people talking to me, right?
Right.
And what I found out was that a lot of the people aren't either cruel or stupid or whatever. It's just that they don't know. And it's not that, again, not stupid don't know. It's that they have this wrong conviction about where they want to go. So to answer your question, what I did was I decided to take a look at esports as an industry. And I thought, well, okay, so of course the pro scene is going to be the first thing that's going to blossom because that's where the money is. That's where the viewers are. That's where the ad
Mm-hmm.
money is. But the next things that are blossoming is going to be the talent development side. At least that's the way I viewed it. Was in Denmark where I live, there is a strong culture for supporting kids in what they want to do in meaningful ways early in life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for example, in Denmark, you can go to school and you can study esports in the schools. And I was in love with this concept, right? Because all of a sudden, there was someone who was taking the sports approach, or at least the way I thought was good, and they were approaching esports with that idea, with
Mm-hmm.
that sort of mentality. So I ended up going back, and I worked for a couple of companies just working around the place, um, who were building different esports solutions, right? And I have done a lot of that. Is I sort of I pivoted into this role where my job became, instead of working as the head coach, teams started hiring me to fix specific issues. So someone would be like, "Oh, our players have pain in their body. Come fix it." So what I would do was I would look at stuff, and then I would call a doctor
Yeah.
because turns out the doctor should do this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And in the same way, some teams would have no synergy. So the teams would call me and they would say, come make us synergistic. And then what I would do was I would come in and I would take a look, and then I'd call a psychologist or a sports psychologist, right? Because um, letting go of my ego, letting go of this idea that I had to know everything. I had to decide everything. I was the head coach, for fuck's sake. I was on top of the ladder, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
letting go, stepping down and putting myself as another cog in the wheel really pivoted me in these different directions where all of a sudden I was writing curricula for like just school. What are we going to teach the kids who does esports in school, but they're not like professional. They're like
Yeah.
bronze and stuff, right? And then I found out that was as hard as being the coach in a way, because it's, as a human
You're a
is really
teacher then.
right. And that's fantastic because my opinion of the time, and this is again revealing my my issues here, but my opinion of the time was that a teacher was someone who wasn't necessarily willing to take on the extra responsibilities of a coach. But that's not what's happening with a teacher. What's happening with
Mm-hmm.
a teacher is they are more typically, and I'm generalizing here, they're typically more specialized than coaches, but they also typically have to be able to teach someone in a broader way, right? Like if a teacher steps as close to someone as a coach might, then things can get confusing because that's not a teacher's role. A teacher's role isn't necessarily to be a sort of a person in that player's life. It's to be an expert or something.
Mm.
And this mindset took me all over the place, man. I've been a mentor, like teaching. Take some parents would call me with their 15-year-old kids, and they would say, "Hi, my kid's like nearly challenger. I don't know what that means because I'm a mom." but he really likes this game. He says he can maybe make money later. Do you want to do like one-on-one coaching? And I would say, maybe. How? Because no, it's not
Yeah.
a thing, right? Like you can't go on you can go on these websites and find coaches for 20 euro an hour, right? And I've been on those websites, but actually getting this personal connection, removing
It's
the
way more
internet.
valuable.
Oh, right. And like even saying that, like telling people I went from coaching LEC, so I went to sitting down with a 15-year-old and working like with one 15-year-old at a time. People will say, well, that's a step down, right? Well, actually, I had so much more fun, right? Because this sometimes you would get on a team and someone would hire you for 6 months, and you just day like week two, you would be like, this team, I don't like being here. Or maybe I would be like, the team won't implement the core things that are important to me. But in this situation, I had one person, two people to be accountable to, right? Me and the kid.
Mm.
And I had the opportunity to really imprint in these people the stuff that I wanted to have. And you
Yeah.
know,
They're
once,
sponges because they're
right,
open. They came with the question instead of you implying the
right,
things to them.
right.
It's
And
way different dynamic.
and none of the things I taught these people, none of it pretty much was game related. There's probably a couple of things because you need a certain level to sort of reach certain things, right? But but can you imagine like the idea that these kids, even the stuff I was teaching them, they couldn't use right now because it was so far removed. Does that make sense? Because
Mm.
I was teaching them how to fix a problem that they might not even have in 10 years. Because all of the problems you have in esports these days are because of stuff like communication and lack of money. So if people learn to talk to each other and there's more money in esports, they might not even have these problems. But it's still good advice, right? Because it's like teaching people to be honest, even if it's hard, that's applicable anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Life
Right,
skill.
right. And that's why people started giving me the title of life coach. And I really resented that because I wasn't, first of all, my life isn't done. I'm very much still doing it, right?
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
and sort of that realization took me um, into the next realization, which was I missed my family. This is gonna sound really cheesy, but for me, I was a young kid because I left Denmark when I was 19 to go to LEC.
Hmm.
And when you're 19, mom and dad can sort of sod off. They're lovely and I love them,
Hmm.
but mom, not now, please. I'm busy. Type deal.
Yeah.
And then after working abroad for 3 or 4 years, I had family members, not like immediate like mom or dad stuff, but I had family members die, and people would send me messages on Facebook and they'd be like, sorry you missed the funeral, but we get it, you're busy. And I wanted to fucking scream their head off, right? Because I'm not too busy for my family dying. But I
Mm.
was. And I felt disgusting. I felt so bad. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah. You felt really ashamed because
I
you had
did.
the sort of opportunity. You could have done something, but
And that's the thing is I had, it's not that I was underpaid and I couldn't afford to go home. It's that we had work. And
yeah,
somehow,
you felt obliged to
yeah,
stay
right.
there.
And I could have taken sick days, but then that would have cascaded into this whole thing. And then it occurred to me that when I get back to the LEC, if that's something I decide I want to try out again, I want to work with a very high quality team again, because I definitely still feel like I have it in me, right? But if I do decide to try and get back on one of these teams, it is going to be with the complete backing of my own human being and the goals that I have in life, not just in esports. And what that means is I'm not leaving until I have in writing from my boss that I get to take days off, for example.
Mm.
Like I am sick. When I'm 19, 20, 21, sure you can shame me into like, no, you don't need this weekend because it's very important that we practice now. But
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I'm 26 now, not just you. I need my time off. I need vacation. I need mental health days. I need to have enough time outside of the workday to live a good life. Does
Good
that make sense?
agreements. Yeah, you
Exactly.
want good agreements,
Yeah.
and
So
more
yeah.
so, it's getting there. It's getting there. I'm
Mm.
also looking at the clock because we're talking, and you have
Oh yes.
such great stories. No, it's okay. Like you. That's how we call it in the Netherlands. I'm hanging on your lips. Uh, we at least I want to learn more because I love your passion and the emotion you bring into it, and I
Mm,
believe you're a good storyteller, and I'm for sure 100% believe that the audience believes you're a great storyteller as well. So that's why it's very easy to listen to you of all these stories, and it makes a lot of sense. And also for other coaches and people that are listening to approach teams and make decisions for themselves and to look also towards the environment, how they want to do things, maybe make some decisions there and look within them. Like also personally, like can I make a different change or a different pivot in how I view esports or how I
mhm,
approach teams or people as individuals? So there's a lot of good stuff and great intentions towards your stories.
mhm.
To start to go a little bit more towards the end of this episode, because we for sure will do perhaps in the future an episode a 2.0 with Coach Hazel about maybe life coaching or maybe individual coaching or
Mm,
curriculum, how you get into there, because I know a little bit of about that as well. Like I got
mhm,
into contact, so there's so many more topics that I feel like we can discuss and that we can talk about. But to end this episode and go towards the ending, if there's one piece of advice you would give esports coaches, what would you give them?
Esports coaches, specifically coaches.
Yeah, or staff, or just in general. You take the stage.
Mhm. So the one piece of advice is um, life is not American movies. Stop trying to look for your aha moment, because it turns out real, real genuine change is 1,000 small steps. It's not one day
Mm.
you wake up and you realize you've been wrong all along, right? Like it's it's
No,
that sort of looking for the great big thing is that thing we talked about earlier, which is looking for cheat codes, which is antithetical, because if you get lucky and find something that no one else knows, at best what you are telling yourself is the difference between where I'm at and my competition is one lucky break.
yeah,
And you never want to be in a position where you are only one lucky break better than everyone else.
for sure. It sounds like to me like with also the a lot of small steps. It made me think of World of Warcraft
Oh, I love
Legendary
that game.
Quest,
Love that game.
right? World of Warcraft Legendary Quest, where you accept a quest, but it takes a long shit ton
Hmm.
of time to fulfill the quest. You need to farm, build up experiences,
Yeah.
do so many chores, so many things. You have to explore so many regions and
Mm.
areas. And I believe the same goes for as being a coach. You cannot go one path. You have to do a little bit of go into the width and into the depth of specific topics to really hone your skills and acquire that legendary status
Hmm.
or item that you feel comfortable in to provide that
Mm.
type of value and difference into the world, basically. So I thought of that analogy, so I just
Oh
drop
yeah.
it drop it out there.
Yeah, go get your Apexis crystals, guys. This is a great idea. Was it 4,800 and something?
Yeah, a lot,
Oh
a
god.
lot. Yeah. So also, what we do in this episodes, all these episodes, so we try to weave the coaches together, right, with
Hmm.
questions. So in the last episode, number 4, the coach Mick Arcanic de Jong asked a question, and he asked, "What are, in your opinion, the core principles of coaching?" So that's a great question for him. So thank you, Arcanic, for that. What is your opinion? What do you think like is the core principles of coaching?
So I thought of this because I think this is a fantastic question. It's one of those cheating questions because in theory I can put anything here and it's going to sound great. But the Well, right? But I think
Right, right.
thank you, Mick, for setting me up for success here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So for me, for my personal sake, the three core principles I work with is shift intensity, and what that means is um, you cannot approach coaching from a principle where you are saying this is good or bad, because good and bad is not coaching, it's judging.
yeah.
What you need to do is you need to figure out, are we in need of turning up the intensity or turning down the intensity? Because typically when you are actually at work as a coach, you will be on sort of the right track, but it's the frequency and intensity that's missing. So you might be doing the right thing but not enough, or too much of it. And once you start thinking in terms of intensity, you also realize that people have different sort of ways to register, right? You can have maybe you have players who are physically tired after a full day, but they actually have mental capacity left over. So now you know you can put in a little bit more of that side of things, right? And
Mm,
and starting to think about intensity lets you open up to this idea that you can work flexibly, instead of it's not on the list, so we won't do it, so to speak. The other principle is you do need a plan, but you don't need a master plan that you need to stick to, because being a coach isn't having the best plan. Being the best coach is having a plan and then being the best at adapting, right? Like you need to be able to fit new exciting developments
mm,
into your master plan. The most common form of this I see is people having a team with 5 players, and
mm.
the plan is really great until one of them is sick or something, right?
Yeah.
And if that's what it takes for your plan to fall apart, it wasn't a great plan, right? um, and then my last principle is a funny one. It's understanding that coaching is not teaching, and that coaching is also not teaching people that coaching isn't teaching. um, Coaching is what we talked about earlier. It's listening to what people need and then actually doing that, and instead of just asking people what do you think needs to happen and then waiting for your turn to talk at them, right? Like that's was my big mistake when I was I'm hesitant to say child, right? As I was young,
Mm,
um, I would say, well, what do you guys want to do? And then I would look at them and nod while I waited for my turn to talk, because I knew
mm.
what I wanted to do. And
Yeah,
if I was actually listening to them, I might forget what I want to do. So I have to remember it and then wait. So that it doesn't work.
yeah. You didn't put it. You put an expectation up front, like I'm gonna
Exactly.
talk in this session about this
Mm,
and this. I'm gonna expect that they
mm,
will listen to me, etc. But I'll listen to them, quote unquote,
mm,
and while actually just letting them speak. You hear them, but you're not listening to them.
mhm. And the thing that was so liberating from that was a lot of the great coaches I knew from, for example, sports, would do this thing where they would show up to practice and they would be, in my eyes, woefully unprepared, right? Because they would say, we're working on this and this, and then we'll see, we'll take it from there. And I thought, these idiots, why didn't they
Mm,
prep harder, right? Like they need to know exactly where to put all the time, right? But
yeah,
it turns out what I was doing was I was making needless preparations, because a lot of the time I would like over prepare, and then when we have to adapt, step 1 and 2 was fine, but step 6 through 12 they just disappear,
yeah,
right? And I was not willing to accept that. I was trying to force people back on the plan, which is, if you are working against a sea of different opinions, then perhaps it's time to consider whether you truly are just the only person on planet Earth that knows best. Because that was a big deal for me. Was I always knew best, right? And
yeah.
I lost a lot of flexibility in there.
Sounds like a lot of you wanted to have a lot of control.
Oh yes, and what you, of course, right? Because the first thing people tell me, the managers when I was a new coach, they would tell me, by the way, you're young, no one is going to respect you. So my whole shtick was never let people disrespect me, right? Like that was my whole, because
Mm,
I was so waiting for that to happen, right? I was waiting for this guy to, haha, I knew it, I knew you didn't because, and then when you come into it with that, the best thing you get is nothing. Does that make
yeah,
sense? Like the best situation I had was I left the day thinking I didn't fuck up. but you don't want to go home from work thinking I didn't mess up. You want to go home from work thinking I did great, right? But you have to be able to put yourself out there to do that, and I
Uh,
wasn't doing that.
It's also like an what I saw here there is an attribution that you've been given from the organization.
Hmm.
Like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
they don't respect you. It's like if you
Hmm.
start a new class as being a teacher. Oh, this is a really difficult class, and that particular dude there, right there in front of your desk, he's the
Hmm.
true asshole of them all.
Yeah.
Like, how does it do with your whole perception and approach in that whole classroom? And it goes through all life and all
Hmm.
layers. So, yeah, great stuff. Very great stuff, Nikolai. So there's also a question for you to be asked towards the next guest on the podcast.
Hmm.
And the next guest will talk about scouting and selection. And what is a particular, maybe an interesting question that you want to ask this coach about maybe scouting or selection or something else?
So I actually I thought about this because his name is Flores.
Yes, escapist Burman for the
And
next episode.
he has this one job if he works with scouting and selection. It's something I'm super jealous of because building talent and talent development and this whole scouting and getting to decide who makes it, so to speak, that was
Mm,
and has been a big theme in my life. So Flores, you're living my dream, dude. Keep at it. My question for you is, in traditional sports, what we also often experience is we experience a larger catalog of active players in whatever sport you might have. So
yes.
basketball teams will have a significant amount of substitutes, the same with football, the same with hockey, and so on and so on and so on.
Mm.
Why do you think we're not seeing this in esports? Is it applicable to esports? And also, if it is applicable, what needs to happen for the teams to be able to facilitate that? Because for me, that's the big thing, right? Is if you have 10 people instead of 5 in a team, now we're talking, right? That's a team instead of just a group.
Yeah. So to maybe narrow it down the question, if I understood it correctly, why are we seeing no substitutes or bigger teams or rosters in order
Yeah,
to feel? Is that
exactly,
the question? Why
exactly.
are we not seeing substitutes or bigger rosters in
Why
terms of scouting and selection for teams?
why aren't we seeing more substitutes and seeing them be used, so to speak? Like they tried with EasyHoon way back in
Yeah.
2017. I think it's like the biggest success story ever, and even that was a gigantic success in the results they produced, but a failure in terms of perception because everyone was like, "Well, EasyHoon is really just time away from Faker," and I think that whole side of esports is fascinating.
Yeah. Great question. For sure, escapist Flores will provide you with a good answer. So stay tuned for the next episode as well, Nikolai, and as well as for the listeners to get that answer.
Why wouldn't?
So if other coaches, staff members, players that are or other people interested that are loving this podcast and they enjoyed it the full ride and they want to contact you for, I don't know, coaching advice or giving a shout out or hey, loved your insights or whatever, how can they find you?
So my I have a Twitter which has open DMs. It's at Hazel Coaching,
Mm-hmm.
as spelled as it sounds.
Yeah,
Um,
Hazel.
yeah, and also if you would like to get in contact for business proposals, it is easiest to reach me at Hazel Coaching, uh, at gmail.com. Yes,
All
hazelcoaching
right.
at gmail.com.
All right, at hazelcoaching at gmail.com. I will put it all into the description below. And if you're on Twitter, good chance that you are an esports enthusiast and you have a good chance to have Twitter. So be sure to follow Nikolai at Hazel Coaching so you can stay up to date with his live, his opinions, etc. And also send him a message for this awesome podcast as well. So Nikolai, thank you so much for spending some time with me. We broke the record at least for this episode. And I
No.
loved it, every minute of it. And thank you so much for sharing your stories and experiences. And we will sure talk more into the future, 100%.
Thanks for having me. It was fantastic and so much fun.
Great stuff. Really enjoyed it. And that is it, guys, for the 5th episode of the Next Level Esports Podcast, the number one podcast for esports coaches and team development to help you and your team reach that next level by getting the people side of esports right. If you like this episode, be sure to leave a comment down below and smash that like, share, and subscribe button. Be sure to tell your teammates and colleagues about this podcast because we are here to provide as much value for as much people as we can. If you want more information or things to learn, you can go to the Next Level Esports Discord or go to the Next Level Esports YouTube channel for more learning content. Find us as well on Twitter at next_L_esports. And once again, let us know what you think of this episode. Thank you so much, Nicolai, as a guest on this podcast. And for you who is listening, I hope that you are also tuned in for the next episode where we'll take a close look at the scouting and selection of talents, players, and teams with Floris Escapist Burman. Thank you very much all for listening. And as always, bye-bye.